Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share some thoughts on My World of the Unknown by Alifa Rifat, who is an Egyptian short story writer, and this volume, Distant View of a Minaret, has a number of excellent stories from her. The title story, Distant View of a Minaret, At the Time of the Jasmine, they all really kind of deserve their own video. But I want to focus on My World of the Unknown because while a strange and interesting and fascinating story, I think it's also just very strong. The language Rifat is using, the imagery she's calling to mind is extremely intense. Certainly left a strong imprint on my mind. And so I want to dig into this one. Rifat has characters, the character of her stories, primarily the narrator is a woman who's married or perhaps even a widow. And she's at a point in life where she's starting to question some ideas. She's questioning her happiness, not necessarily the value of her existence, but the value of her experiences and what those are accruing in her life. And sort of trying to identify, has she made compromises, and what other compromises would she be willing to make? And they're fascinating stories. A number of them are very short, and yet they possess an enormous amount of deep human emotion. The setting of the stories is not in the center of urban Cairo, as we kind of think of with some Egyptian writers. Rather, we're in sometimes rural areas, but the closest we ever get to Cairo is a character taking a trip there while living in sort of a more suburban part of Cairo. And so there's a geographical distance from sort of the human connections and associations, but there's also a great emotional distance that exists. And that's very true in My World of the Unknown. It's not as explicitly stated in that story, but it becomes evident. So this is how the story opens. There are many mysteries in life, unseen powers in the universe, worlds other than our own, hidden links and radiations that draw creatures together and whose effect is interacting. They may merge or be incompatible, and perhaps the day will come when science will find a method for connecting up these worlds in the same way as it has made it possible to voyage to other planets. Who knows? Yet, one of these other worlds I have explored. I have lived in it and been linked with its creatures through the bond of love. I used to pass with amazing speed between this tangible world of ours and another invisible Earth, mixing in the two worlds on one and the same day, as though living it twice over. When entering into the world of my love and being summoned and yielding to its call, no one around me would be aware of what was happening to me. All that occurred was that I would be overcome by something resembling a state of languor and would go off into a semi-sleep. Nothing about me would change except that I would become very silent and withdrawn. Though I am normally a person who is talkative and eager to go out into the world of people, I would yearn to be on my own, would long for the moment of surrender as I prepared myself for answering the call. And so right away we're caught in this idea that our narrator, our unnamed narrator, is going to be experiencing sort of a dual existence throughout this story. And the way in which this unfolds is fascinating. She and her husband has been transferred to a more rural area. She goes out to find a house, finds a house that's very cheap, but seems to be the perfect size. Like the price being asked for is far lower. The rent being asked for is far lower than what she would expect. And there's a woman there with her own child who is sort of run off by the agent showing our narrator the house. And there's this, it's a very strange sensation. And so they do some renovation, they move in, everything's to be fine. And then that woman comes back. And there's almost this question of like, is she, real? Is she a ghost? Is she a spirit, a jinn? And she seems to be real, but she's saying, okay, I'll leave her to you, and our narrator wonders, who's this her that's being referred to? Is there somebody living under the house or something? And then one day out in the garden, she sees a snake. And so we get a really fascinating moment where, having seen the snake, our narrator wonders, why does she keep thinking about this snake? Of course, there's dangers. They take all these precautions. They put up wire mesh. They've found some holes. They cement over those cracks. But here's what our narrator says. All I wanted was to stretch myself out and drowse. In bewilderment, I asked myself, could it be that I was in love? But how could I love a snake? Or could she really be one of the daughters of the monarchs of the jinn? I would awake from my musings to find out that I'd been wandering in my thoughts and recalling to mind how magnificent she was. And what is the secret of her beauty, I would ask myself? Was it That I was fascinated by her multicolored, supple body? Or was it that I had been dazzled by that intelligent, commanding way she had of looking at me? Or could it be the sleek way she had of gliding along, so excitingly dangerous, that had captivated me? Excitingly dangerous? No doubt it was this excitement that had stirred my feelings and awakened my love. For did they not make films to excite and frighten? There was no doubt, but that was the secret of my passion for her. My preoccupation with her was due to the excitement that had aroused, through intense fear, desire within myself, an excitement that was sufficiently strong to drive the blood hotly through my veins whenever the memory of her came to me, thrusting the blood in bursts that made my heart beat wildly, my limbs limp, and so, throwing myself down in a pleasurable state of torpor, my craving for her would be awakened, and I would wish for her coil-like touch, her graceful, gliding motion. And yet I fell to wondering how union would come about, how craving be quenched, the delights of the body realized between a woman and a snake. And did she, I wondered, love me and want me as I loved her? And so she, in addition to clearing out, cleaning up and making sure that there's no way a snake from the garden could come into the house, they've also have hired someone to come out and sort of examine the hole. And he comes back and says, there's no dangerous snakes in the house, but rather there's a daughter of the king of monarchs, this spiritual creature, perhaps a jinn, who's there, and you should be aware of that. And our narrator initially scoffs and is like, what are you talking about? And he goes, hey, don't question me, I'm telling you what it is. But what we have here now is this fascinating question. Because for Rifat, in her stories, and this is true across her stories, the concept of adultery or of romantic love outside of marriage is not an exciting concept. It's not a dangerous but exciting and like somehow being true to oneself concept, the way that we find often in a lot of the fiction of the 20th century from the US or from European writers. Rather, it's very taboo, and it's beyond taboo to something that the characters don't even really conceive of. They don't the characters in Rifat's stories don't think about having a relationship outside of their marriages as something they would ever countenance. And yet we have this narrator admitting these interesting things about why is she always thinking about this snake that she saw just once. And so she continues to sort of wonder about where this snake might be. And one day she's sleeping and she sees a crack in the wall, and it starts opening until it's large enough for a snake to come out. And it seems to be that same snake. Closing my eyes, my heart raced with joy and my body throbbed with mounting desire as there dawned in me the hope of an encounter. I lay back in submission to what was to be. No longer did I care whether love was coming from the world of reptiles or from that of the jinn, sovereigns of the world. Even were this love to mean my destruction, my desire for it was greater. I heard a hissing noise that drew near, then it changed to a gentle whispering in my ear, calling to me. I am love, O enchantress. I showed you my home in your sleep. I called to you to my kingdom when your soul was dozing on the horizon of dreams. So come to me, my sweet beloved. Come and let us explore the depths of the azure sea of pleasure. And she, our narrator seems to be almost imagining this incredible, otherworldly realm she could be in. I felt her as and finally then she feels the actual snake there on the bed beside her. I felt her as she slipped between the covers, then her two tiny fangs like two pearls began to caress my body, arriving at my thighs. The golden tongue like an arak twig inserted its pronged tip between them and began sipping and exhaling, sipping the poisons of my desire and exhaling the nectar of my ecstasy till my whole body tingled and started to shake in sharp, painful, rapturous spasms. And all the while the tenderest of words were whispered to me as I confided to her all my longings. And it's incredible that we have Rifat creating this story and publishing this story in Egypt. And those stories were originally written in Arabic in the 1960s, 1970s is when she was publishing. And to delve into the deep, central nature of this longing that her narrator has, this deep desire she has for affection. We're not told that she doesn't have a happy marriage. We're not told that her husband ignores her, or when they're intimate together, that he's only concerned with his pleasure. As we do see in some of the other stories, including Distant View of a Minaret, Rifat is very open about a narrator or a character wanting more from the physical component of her relationship and her marriage than what she's receiving. That's not in evidence at all here. It's just rather this deeper longing that suddenly our narrator is awakened to. And so she continues to, you know, rather than go out and spend the day out and working or going to market or taking care of things, she rather wants to find time each day to go and rest during the day and be joined by the snake. After some days had passed, I found another hole alongside my bed. My beloved came and whispered to me, "Why are you so coy and flee from me, my bride? Is it fear of your being rebuffed, or is it from aversion? Are you not happy with our being together? Why do you want for us to be apart?" "I am in agony," I whispered back. "Your love is so intense and the desire to enjoy you so consuming. I am frightened I shall feel that I am tumbling down into a bottomless pit and being destroyed." "My beloved," she said, "I shall only appear to you in beauty's most immaculate form." "But it is natural for you to be a man," I said in a precipitate outburst, "seeing that you are so determined to have a love affair with me." And here's where we get one of the more interesting components of the story. If the narrator was having these dreams and these experiences with a male character, it would undoubtedly be a form of adultery. It would be taboo. But Rifat allows her character to have all these things, to have these experiences in a way that manages to preserve what you know, sort of on a technical level would be the integrity of her marriage. And so ultimately, the narrator has made a sort of a pact of peace with this snake, that no snakes will be harmed and the snakes won't harm anybody, and the two of them will continue to have their encounters together. But one day her husband, and it's important to note that her husband kills a snake, and it brings up this idea of sort of the jealous husband ruining this moment of happiness, this moment of this, you know, intimate relationship she's been having. And while he doesn't know that he's doing it, the ways in which the snake, when it had initially, in the very first encounter she'd had, where the snake's tongue was referred to as a twig, it's important to note that when the husband kills the snake and thus violates the pact, and she and her beloved only have one more night encounter together before they part forever, that the husband uses a stick to do that. So she closes saying, "I still live in memory and in hope. I crave for the house and miss my secret love. Who knows? Perhaps one day my beloved will call me. Who really knows?" And so we have this incredibly deep, emotional, passionate tale from a woman who's trying throughout all of her stories to consistently reveal the interior lives of her characters, usually women, mothers in rural or suburban Egypt, but doing it in a story that truly develops rather than unfolds, a story that develops and awakens for our narrator numerous feelings she had never even realized she wasn't experiencing. And I think it's a beautiful tale. The translation is from Dennis Johnson Davies, and he translates all the stories in this volume. And I really cannot recommend this volume highly enough. The stories are short stories, but they're very focused. They're very deep and probing stories. So as I was thinking, of course, of The Great Sweat from Zora Neale Hurston. I think that's an excellent story that, particularly with the motif of the snakes, that ties in. But in the sense of sort of what feel like supernatural or magical encounters with the beloved snake being a female jinn, I was thinking, of course, of My Phantoms from Théophile Gautier. There were aspects of it that reminded me of the better moments in D.H. Lawrence's romantic writing, such as The Rainbow or Women in Love. The sense of awakening that existed reminded me of the great modernist Catherine Mansfield and her stories. And it's important to note that Rifat is as a writer, was only fluent in Arabic. And so she only read Arabic works or works that had been translated into Arabic. And it's quite possible, I doubt she ever read Gautier or Zora Neale Hurston. It's quite possible she had never read Mansfield or D.H. Lawrence. Certainly, though, I suspect she had read the Tales from the Thousand and One Nights. And these, you know, that one story feels closer to the more explicit nature that exists in many of the Arabian Nights, the Tales from the Thousand and One Nights. Her characters are firmly not just practicing Muslims, but firmly believing Muslims. And that is a key part of their identity, is their faith. The translation of the Quran from Tariq Khalidi is, I think, a masterpiece. It's hard to mention Egyptian writers without mentioning the great Naguib Mahfouz and his Cairo trilogy. Although this is very much a multi-generational family saga set in a more urban Cairo, something that is, again, viewed at a distance in the stories from Rifat. This sense of sort of questioning one's happiness in marriage, I think, was done phenomenally by Janet Hobhouse in Dancing in the Dark. And I would add perhaps Revolutionary Road from Richard Yates. So let me know if you've ever read any of the other stories from Rifat, or if there are other Egyptian writers you enjoy. I really have been impressed with the stories in this collection. I'll probably do another video sometime in a couple of months on one of her other stories, either Distant View of Minaret or, gosh, what was it? At the Year of Jasmine? At the Time of the Jasmine, which is another phenomenal story. So thanks, everybody.